the smell of grass and leather. There were days when we'd play too. We'd cross the lines when the sun would shine and make our dreams come true. I had a glove on my hand and a girl in the stands. She stole my heart like a hit and run. It seems the world was so much simpler back then. We was just out there for fun. I pray for someone to hold your hand, and baseball in the summer, someone to walk with you when this world grows cold. Baseball in the summer, baseball in the summer.
VMAC Legendary Rivals podcast, a Mac cast with Steve McGrail. My goodness, Steve, how are you? Looking pretty sharp in a Blue Jays hat as we get close to the season, my friend.
Yeah, things are warming up here in Wyoming, Ontario. We're in the banana belt of southwestern Ontario, and it seems like there's a custody battle going on between Mother Nature with winter and spring, whether they want to who's going to win, because one day it's 18-20 degrees and then the next day it's snow flurries and -3. So
wow, that's it just kind of makes you feel like it's time to get out with a glove and throw, eh? So that's exciting stuff.
In between trips to the arena and the ballpark.
Is Wyoming always been home for you?
Wyoming has been home. I was born and raised here, and my parents still live on the main street in Wyoming, and I live about 6 blocks away from home, and my sister is in between my mom and dad and our house, so she's still in town, and my older brother just lives out in the country. They just bought a little hobby farm, so they're 10 minutes out of town, and my other brother, he just built a new place just one town over. So the whole family's all within 15 minutes of each other, so it's good.
It's amazing. I'm pretty sure that no one's going to get into a bar brawl with you so close to home. Let's pick up where you before there was a McMaster. Tell us a little bit about growing up and how you developed a love for sports. Obviously, if you're trucking to an arena and a ballpark, there's a deep passion there, but maybe start there.
Well, for those that don't know, Wyoming, Ontario is, we're about 20 minutes east of Sarnia. We're kind of in the middle between London and Sarnia, small little town, population 2,500. And Petrolia is 10 minutes from Wyoming. So we went to elementary school in Wyoming, and then we went to high school in Petrolia. When I was growing up, both Petrolia and Wyoming had baseball teams. Like every small town had a baseball team. Now Petrolia has the hockey programs, and that's the way it's always been. But Wyoming has kind of taken over the baseball programming, and Petrolia's organization folded due to lack of players, 15, 20 years ago. And then Wyoming became the kind of hub for baseball, and Petrolia looked after the hockey. So we get kids coming both ways. So 2 small towns. Petrolia is about 5,000, 6,000 people, and Wyoming's 2,500. But we kind of work together to feed each other's programs for different sports, which is good. Growing up, my parents' home was right on the main street of Wyoming, right beside the funeral home and the corner store, and it was kind of the middle of town. Everybody passed it on the way to the ballpark, on the way to the park, the pool. So growing up, it was great because there was lots of action. You were always, 1 block away from all the action, whether it was the pool, the park, the baseball diamonds, whatever. But everybody knew you, and they knew if mom and dad were away for the weekend or whatever, and the boys were home, if anything was going on, everybody knew before your parents got home. So you always had to be on your best behaviors, because small towns, word traveled quick. So, but yeah, just we walked to school every day. We were 2 blocks from the school. Usually never made it home right after school, because we'd always stop off at the ballpark and we'd have sandlot games going on, bare feet in the outfield. You corner off a section of the field and you had a home run fence, and you'd always have, someone, it was always tennis ball and wood bat, and you just make teams whoever showed up or whoever came. And then once the teams came to start their games for 6:00, then we got booted off and went home and had supper. And one of our big things in Wyoming was at night we'd go down to the tennis courts, and it was in a big park. You had the pool, the tennis courts, the playground, and everything. And we'd go there and have home run derbies, and we'd stand in one corner and have someone pitch, and you'd see how many tennis balls you could pump out of the bat or the tennis courts, and then you'd go collect them all, and then the other guy's turn to hit, and he'd try to beat you, and we'd do that. And eventually we got the town turned the lights on for us, and they'd keep it on till 10:00 at night. So it was that was our childhood growing up. It was baseball in the summer, and then once OBA's finished in Labor Day weekend, you put the ball gear away and you pulled the hockey gear out, and away you went for hockey until it was springtime again. So it was great. It was awesome. It kept you busy, and everybody in town, all the kids kind of did that. They played baseball and then played hockey, and a lot of guys were on the same team. So a lot of good friendships growing up.
Do you remember, did you have a coach that, like, when did you start to get into, more formal, organized sports? And did you have any coaches that were influences early?
Well, when we first started out, it was basically house league, and then Tyke was about 10 years old, I think. You went right to Tyke. So you went from house league to Tyke. Tyke was your first formal travel rep ball experience. And I was probably 10, I think 1985, we ended up having a team that won All Ontario. And that year, my uncle, who just recently passed away, he was my coach, and he was one of those guys. He didn't have kids, but he loved sports and he loved to win. And I think he instilled a lot of that winning mentality, and sometimes it might have been in an unorthodox way that wouldn't fly today, but we got the job done. But yeah, like, you got to remember, Wyoming is a 2,500 population town. Back then, OBAs dictated what level you went for OBAs based on your population. So Wyoming being the smallest population, we were E. So for OBA classification, we were E for many years, and you weren't allowed to move up or down, or you couldn't go any lower. We were already at the bottom. But some of the best baseball that we played were against some of these small towns like Petrolia, Florence, Kamlaki, Flesherton. I know we played Flesherton in the final of that one year, and it was a great game. And we would often in our leagues compete against Chatham and Sarnia. Those were the two bigger centers, and we would beat them or hang with them as best we could. And they're drawing from 60 to 80,000 people, and we had little 2,500, and everybody on the team were basically either at the Catholic school or at the public school, and everybody knew each other. So it was great. And a lot of those kids continued to play right on up until they went their own way. So I think,
amazing.
My uncle got me started, and then Dave Willis was another one. He was one of those guys in town that just loved baseball. We called him Tiger Dave. He was a big Tigers fan, and he always coached the Pee-wee level, and a couple times there was no coaches for Bantam or Midget, I think, and he coached them too. He was coaching multiple teams and just loved baseball, and he probably taught us more about baseball than most kids at that age got at Pee-wee and Bantam. And he was one of those guys that would always you wanted to throw extra batting practice or work on something, and you just go knock on his door and he'd grab his stuff and come right down to the ballpark. So it was good to have that resource growing up as well.
Did you said you had a brother, were you guys competitive against each other, or were you guys kind of on the same team about these things?
My older brother, Mike, he's only a year older. So every other year we were on the same team growing up, and he wasn't on the team that we won, but he was always, bigger and stronger. I was always trying to keep up to him, and he would, he was a good hitter, good ball player. He didn't take it as far as I did, but he got into the 2-pitch and was kind of I don't know, he wasn't a superstar, but he was a very good player in the 2-pitch leagues for many years. So
yeah, it's amazing. So as you're progressing through high school, how did McMaster become a place you're looking at? Was it one of the three you picked, or did you have other schools that were in mind? How did you end up choosing McMaster?
Well, Mac wasn't really, I don't know, back then it wasn't like you start high school in grade 9 and start thinking about stuff. It was go, oh, I'm in OAC, it's my last year, what am I going to do, kind of thing. And then you start figuring things out. You're like, oh, I was going to take kinesiology somewhere, and human kinetics was at Windsor. So anyways, I narrowed it down based on what the entrance requirements were and where I could get in. So I ended up applying to Windsor for human kinetics. I actually applied to Brock for phys ed, and I applied to Mac for phys ed. And I visited all three, and Mac was the last one I visited. And when I got on campus, it was like, this is where I want to go. It was just that whole, everything's included in one spot. You didn't have to leave campus if you didn't need to. So that was kind of it. Not so much the program, even though the program was very good. It was once I got boots on campus, it was like, this feels like home, and this is where I want to go. So that's kind of my transition that way. My wife, she was also thinking kinesiology, and we were dating at the time in high school. And so we kind of said, we're not going to let this determine where we're going to go. You apply for your 3 schools, I'll apply for my 3 schools, and then we'll decide, and tell each other after, kind of thing. So she applied to, I think she might have applied to Western, Mac, and U of T maybe. I'm not sure about that one. But anyway, she had an eye, and she always wanted to be a physiotherapist, and that was kind of her train of thought going through. And both ended up deciding on Mac. So then we decided, okay, we're going to have to pick residences. So we said, well, if we're going to the same place, we don't need to be in the same building. Let's just pick our own 3 based on what the descriptions were and which ones look good. So we applied for 3, and we ended up both getting into Woodstock Hall. She was on 4th floor and I was on 5th floor. So it ended up fate, I guess. It worked out. And Todd Huther lived across the hall from her in first year on 1st floor. And so we ended up hanging out quite a bit that way, and kind of started the baseball journey that way at Mac.
Is that how you got introduced to the fact they had baseball on campus? Was
yeah, I had no idea there was baseball at Mac. I know the first year, so moving in 93, I think I had to move in on Friday. No, maybe Thursday. I ended up getting special permission or something to move my stuff in early, because I had to get back, because we had juvenile OBAs that weekend somewhere else. And I was basically trying to dump my stuff off at residence, go home, get my ball stuff, go play Labor Day weekend, and then return on the Monday to start university. And I think when they were helping move stuff in, I think Guindon was one of the people that helped lift and move some of the first year people in, and he kind of saw some baseball stuff, and he's like, oh, I'll keep an eye on where this guy's going and whatever. And then I think one of those nice fall days, Todd and I ended up maybe just playing catch outside the res and grassy patch or the parking lot or something. And I think maybe through Todd or Guindon looked out his window and seen a kid that was playing baseball. And next thing you know, I have a message on my door where they have those dry eraser or whatever message boards on the residents' doors. And it was like, you play ball, come see me, room whatever number it was. So I had to go down and see Jason, who I didn't really know at the time. And he says, oh, it looks like you play baseball. Are you interested in playing? And then that whole 2-pitch thing that came up, I kind of forgot about it. But I know Guindon had a team together, and I think he invited me out a couple times, or one time at least, to come down and play. And I ended up going to play, and it almost afterwards felt like it was a tryout. I was like, can this kid play baseball? And then if he passed the 2-pitch test, then he might get an ask to come play for the MAC team later. So
it's really interesting. They were recruiting based off of what you were moving into your res room. That is a novel way.
And I had no idea they even had a baseball team or even thinking about it. And then they kind of threw that meeting out saying we're going to try to get a team up and going, and we need an executive and all this kind of stuff. So Todd was in Woodstock Hall. I was in Woodstock Hall. Guindon was in Woodstock Hall. So that kind of formed part of most of the executive, because it was just easy access and people together. And I think Tui was there maybe the year, he's older, so he was a year before. So then he was kind of on it. So we kind of formed this executive to get this team off the ground. And first thoughts, and I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen here. This is happening pretty quick. And to have a bunch of people just from a residence try to put a university baseball team together was interesting, but we went with it. And I know, Todd mentioned that we went down to Litson Sports and Dundas to try to get some uniforms and stuff. And these babies right here were what we ended up coming up with. Blue. And I said, it's the furthest thing from McMaster colors, but we had to pay our own way. And I think it was $300. And I remember going home or calling home and saying to my parents, I'm like, I'm going to be playing baseball, but it's going to cost $300. And they're kind of like, well, you're kind of footing the bill on OSAP and whatever you made in your summer job. So, but my dad, he ran real estate. He had his own real estate business, and he ended up giving me the $300, and it was kind of pay to play. So I don't know, didn't matter how good you were, as long as we had some warm bodies and could play a little ball, and you had your $300, you got a jersey.
Well, it's it is weird to see you guys attired like the U of T Blues as opposed to McMaster. And do you remember early impressions of your teammates, like the first team, and that would have been the year before the Brock team came in, so you guys would have played
so
Durham and McGill and these types.
Yeah, so 94 was our first real year. We had 4 teams: Durham College, McGill, Guelph, and ourselves. And obviously Todd and I, just because we lived so close together, and at Mac, we kind of chummed with each other and went to the practices and games together. And I don't know, I think Todd had a mountain bike maybe. I had my 10-speed. That's all I had. We didn't have cars or whatever. So to get to practice, which was over at, I think, St. Mary's High School, there was a ball diamond over there. And we would ride our bikes, throw our ball bags on our back, and we'd pedal over and practice. And we'd always go by there was a candy factory that made Swedish berries in Hamilton that would right by the ballpark. And it was like heaven every time you went by there. It would smell so good. They say Hamilton smells like, or stinks, but I said it smelled pretty good at that end. So we'd go over and practice, and then we played our games at Dundas Volunteer Park, and we would ride our bikes down Coots Drive, down the hill into Dundas, and then bike over to our games. So here we are pedaling with our uniforms on our bicycles, going to the games to play, which was fine. And the mosquitoes were awful. And then after the game, you had to pedal your bike back up the hill, back up Coots Drive, which was killer. And then I remember the away games. We didn't have buses or anything. You had to carpool and find your way there. So people were borrowing parents' vehicles and whatever. And I know that Tyler Dearden, he had a family Chevy Astro van that could fit like 8 people or 7 people or something. But it was a gas guzzler, and it was, it cost people $10-$20 or whatever to hop in and go to the away games. And I remember Todd and I, we were more frivolous with our money, or more tight with our money. And Greg Carter was a couple years older than us, but he had a little Honda Civic hatchback. And we'd always make sure we got to him first and said, "We're riding with you," because it would only cost $5. I remember going to McGill University for a weekend of games, and it cost us $5 each person, each way. So it cost us $10 return trip to ride in the Honda Civic. When the other guys got out, I think their drinking money was drained because they had to stop 2 or 3 times to fill up the old gas guzzler van. It cost them $60 each way or something. And then, I remember, like, we'd get down there, and I think there was 2 vehicles. We had 5 in the Honda Civic going to Montreal, which was pretty tight. And there was probably 7 in the van. And I think we had 2 hotel rooms at this hotel in Montreal, and we piled our 12 people into 2 hotel rooms, and I think everybody cost $20 for the hotel room for the weekend or whatever. And basically rolled into town, threw the bags down, and Billy and the boys say, like, "We're heading down to St. Catherine Street, load up, let's go." And some of them, we made it back in decent hour, but I know some of them were probably rolling back in as we were getting ready to go to the park the next day to play.
Yeah, Montreal is definitely a place where if you're sending university-age kids, it's got adventure written all over it. And thankfully, there was no YouTube or phones and cameras.
Yeah, no cameras.
That's pretty outstanding. And you guys obviously had a pretty intense rivalry with Durham College, and lost the national championship game to a McGill team that was pretty skilled. What kind of relationships were you starting to develop outside of Todd at that point? Were there guys you were gravitating towards, or people that stand out in those early years of the MAC program?
Well, I was never a drinker, so I never drank. Even in high school, it was just a choice I made. It wasn't anything medical related or anything. It was just a choice. I just said, it's not for me or whatever. So a lot of times we'd have these pub nights or fundraisers, and I'd always participate, sell the tickets, whatever. I'd show up, and then I'd duck out just before things were getting crazy and wild. So I didn't have a whole lot of those crazy, wild stories, but those guys, I only played for a couple years, but Todd, because we were in residence together for a couple years. Shane Toohey, he was in the phys ed program a year ahead, so he was always good to share, past tests and whatever to help you out. And we crossed paths a few times afterwards, just playing senior ball, hitting tournaments and OBAs or whatever, and you'd cross paths with these guys. And Doug Lunny, stay in contact with him a little bit on just social media and watching what his kids are doing now. And not a whole lot of long term. I know Todd and I met up with our families a couple years ago and went to a Jays game together, and we crossed paths with Billy Newton a few times and stay in touch with him. But for the other guys, there's not a whole lot of, other than what you're doing here and drumming up some more memories and getting the guys kind of connected again. It's been good that way, but we kind of dropped off for a while, and everybody's doing their own separate things. But
yeah,
it's been good to reconnect.
Life and family happens, Steve. It's just part of the way it is. And then I think, as kids start to, go off to university, as mine have, and you start to kind of reconsider, hey, you know what? We were teammates once before. And then when you kind of have these surreal experiences where you run into a teammate that you haven't seen in 30 years and it's like no time passes, they're still the same person. They still have the same jokes. They've kind of got the same sense of humor. You're kind of like, you know what? I kind of miss seeing this guy for 30 years. And, so that part's really, really quite interesting. What position did you play in? And, did things change when Don Graves came on board as a coach?
Yeah, so the first year playing, I was second base. That's kind of where I had played growing up, and was fortunate to play pretty well every game that first year at second base, and then it was fun. It was great. Had a good season. I think I was named All-Star or something at that CBI championship in Guelph when the TSN camera crews were all rolling around. It was kind of weird. You couldn't see much grass. It was covered in leaves that were falling in late October. But it was good. And then that second year would have been what,
95,
95?
I think. Yeah.
That's when Guindon left and Graves came in, and I didn't know anybody really, Graves or Henry. Henry was an interesting fella. But that was also the year that Brad Reason came, and Doug Lunny and some of those younger guys that came into the program, which made it way stronger. I didn't know any of them coming in. We're down in the Southwest Ontario and not aware of all the kingpins in the Toronto area or Oshawa, Whitby, and things like that. So, but obviously when he came in, it was, he was a player and he was going to play, and they asked me to swap over and play third base, which I did. But obviously it's a pretty steep change to go to the hot corner from second base, and there was a lot more players too that came out, which was good as well. So, the second year for me didn't go quite as well as the first year, but that's life, and we had a great time and lots of good memories.
So you said something that piques my interest. You talked about Henry Romanowski being an interesting guy. So that clearly there's a story or two behind that. And we've heard from Bill that, that Henry would show up at practice very early and be working out as everyone came rolling in. He would wear this mesh tank top and these really short shorts, which I'm sure all of you had to go for counseling afterwards. Tell me a little bit about your experiences with Henry Romanowski.
Well, again, it was just that first year, and having not known him, and he was just that eccentric fella, and he loved the game, and he would be out there working and running and, sweating like crazy and wearing his little cut off mesh tank top or whatever he was wearing. But other than that, he was just another guy that loved the game of baseball, and I don't have any ill will towards him or whatever. He was just a different dude. And, he was part of the coaching staff that came in, and, coming from Guindon and basically him running it, but everybody else is just kind of doing their thing and kind of loosey-goosey stuff. And, Donnie and Henry brought in some parameters and some guidelines and started to build the program, which was good, because, the first couple years are there, it kind of felt like it was just like an intramural fun time, and, you're playing just for the love of the game. And there was only 4 teams, and it was college and university mixed, and you're like, okay, what are we really playing here? And then it started to grow and expand, and then it really took off, which was pretty good. So without those guys and without Guindon laying the framework and the groundwork for it, the whole league probably didn't take off as soon. It probably would have got there, but it didn't get its start without them.
Yeah, it's a good point. It really, the 4 teams really then gave rise to, continual growth for about 4 years. Eventually there'd be 10 teams in Ontario. and that eventually grew to the point where the university teams all came under OUA baseball. So, I think the programs that exist today that are varsity programs and have funding and have the support of the university owe a lot, because it wasn't easy, dealing with admin that say to you, you can't even wear the school colors, you have to be blue and white. It seems ridiculous in retrospect, right? Because, you're representing that student body. Again,
Yep.
It's not like you're going and playing, you're playing other schools, and the colleges were all varsity programs. People don't understand this. They were funded, coaches were paid. There was a lot of different things with the college programs that they didn't have the advantage of having athletes for 4 years, but they had the advantage of funding. So it was really interesting from that perspective. Steve, then let me ask you, so you're proceeding through phys ed at this point. How does your playing career finish up, and how do you then you start transitioning into other phases of your life? What does that look like?
So after that 95 season, so that would, second year university, you kind of do your prerequisite classes, and then you can start to branch out and take things that you're more interested in. And at that time, I didn't know really what direction I was going. I was kind of interested in sports admin, and I was interested in doing like athletic training or kind of working with a team kind of thing. And then, so that was the first year that Mac had, I don't know, it would be the equivalent of a co-op placement now, but they had some sports admin opportunities. And so I ended up applying to do a co-op type placement with the Grey Cup committee in 96, that when Hamilton hosted the Grey Cup. So obviously that's in the fall, and with the Grey Cup in November, but all the lead up and all the preparations and stuff happened from September, basically right till Christmas. So I had to make the choice whether I was going to go play baseball again, or if I was going to take this opportunity for a co-op placement with the Grey Cup committee. So I ultimately ended up choosing the Grey Cup committee, and it was an awesome experience. Got to be right beside all the decision makers leading up to Grey Cup, and sat in on some sponsorship stuff with Tim Hortons at Ivor Wynn Stadium, and I ended up being given a Grey Cup van to drive around when I went down for my shifts or placements or whatever, and got to go around and do advertising. And I had to pick Angela Mosca up a few times and take the Grey Cup to the Chrysler dealerships for promo nights. And I came into placement the one day, and there's like 100 tickets for the concert that during Grey Cup week, and they just said, go bring people, take them to school, pass them out, whatever. And it was the Crash Test Dummies, I think, at the time, that was doing the concert, so it wasn't a big draw, but I was a popular guy for a while, handing out free concert tickets on a Thursday night or whatever in Hamilton, and then got to do a bunch of cool stuff, and had to pick up the alumni guys coming in from the airport, and got to bring them into Hamilton, and got to go to the player awards. I was on TSN, and the luncheons and all those kind of things that we basically were in on everything. And then the Grey Cup game, it was Toronto and Edmonton Eskimos. And like 20 minutes before game time, it just started snowing like crazy. And it was like a blizzard. And that was when Flutie and Pinball Clemens were on the Argos, and they ended up pulling, and anybody that was on part of the committees, they ended up calling us down to the sidelines, and we had to take shovels and brooms out and try to shovel off snow on the yard lines so they could see where they were going and what the TV was able to see. So that's kind of where I kind of veered away from Mac baseball and did that and followed that for a while, and then ended up considering going that route, but there wasn't a whole lot of opportunities. after that, or else you had to move towards a big city where the big teams were, and I wasn't ready to do that. So I ended up applying to Sheridan College for athletic training, and I think at the time they weren't going to accept a lot of my classes or whatever credits, and they were going to make me start over and take the 3-year program on top of the 4-year Kines program, which financially and it didn't make a whole lot of sense. So I ended up switching gears and going to Plan B and applied for Teachers College and ended up getting in at Windsor University. Got in at a couple places, but at the time, being male, applying to primary junior level Teachers College was my ticket in, because they were short on men in the primary end, but there were lots in the high school. So ultimately I wanted to teach high school, but I ended up in the primary junior program and then took the bridge programs in the summer to get up to high school level. But so I that's the kind of where I went, and ended up getting lucky and finished Teachers College in April and hired in August and started, and never did a day of supply work and just jumped in and kept going. So
That's amazing. Were you teaching out? Where were you, and what board were you teaching? And, to kind of circle back, obviously you're dating your wife, you're both in Woodstock Hall. Is she along for this journey as well?
yep, she ended up she went, when I got into Teachers College, I went basically back home and drove, because they had a satellite campus in Chatham. So I did my Teachers College in Chatham, drove every day back and forth about 45 minutes. She went physio, and she was in at U of T. So she was at Toronto and I was 3 hours away in Wyoming, and kind of doing our thing. She was busy, I was busy, and then you just kind of make it work, make the trips down on the weekends and keep the romance going, I guess. And then, so she's a full-time physiotherapist now. She's got, she's probably close to 25 years in. I just finished 25 teaching, and things are good.
That's great. You're obviously an educator, gives you some unique insights into group dynamics, which you learn kind of playing baseball. You learn all the dynamics of a team and stuff. Steve, what other things that have been significant in that time? I know you've done some significant things. So why don't we kind of open up, what those 30 years have brought you?
So after we got done our schooling, and we ended up getting married in 2001, and then 2004 we were set to become parents, and we were expecting to have our first child in April, and our stars didn't align and things kind of went awry. My wife went into early labor in January 17th, and we delivered a premature baby girl, and her name was Kylie. And she was born on the 17th of January, and then a couple days later, she had some complications with her lungs, being mature and not premature and not being fully developed. And she passed away on the 19th. And so obviously it's a devastating blow. Like, we're all set and gung-ho, ready to be parents. And then you're dealing with, the loss of a child and a funeral, and trying to deal with all that and answer the questions of why and how and whatever. And so we got, some medical information back that, it was kind of one of those things that it's 1 in 10,000 that it happens, and it's, nothing that we did wrong or could change, and, it's okay to, try again when you're ready, kind of thing. So we ended up, I think more than anything, kind of to help with our grief. I was always a runner, and I would do, the local charity runs and the 5Ks, 10Ks, and got into some marathons and some, half marathons, and was doing all that. And so I think as part of my grieving process, I said, well, hey, I can do this, and we can raise some money for, the NICU in the hospital where she was born. So Kylie's cause was born. So it was Kylie and cause with a K. And we did just in Wyoming, we did a 2-mile walk, or run if you wanted to, just around the streets of town. And it was 2 miles or 3.2 kilometers, and 3.2 signified her birth weight. So it kind of all tied in together. And we used her footprints that we were able to get at the NICU, and use those in the t-shirt design. And we had one of the kids at my school that I was teaching who was really good in art, and we had a contest to design the shirts, and we picked one of the students from school, their design, and we kind of rolled with it for the first year, and we're very shocked at how well we were supported. Again, small towns are wonderful for things like that. Everybody just wants to help out. And over the next, 7-8 years, we did the event, and we finished with over 500 people walking the streets on a Sunday morning. And over the course of that time, we raised $307,000 for the NICU at St. Joe's, or it was at St. Joe's, and it transferred over to London Health Sciences in London for the NICU. And the purpose was to purchase the specialized Omni giraffe beds, which are the Cadillacs of incubators for small babies that when we were in need of at the hospital, they didn't have them. And so that was kind of something we wanted to make sure we're putting money towards something that they need that will help other babies in that situation. Because a lot of times if you fundraise and you just make a donation to the hospital, if you don't earmark it towards something, it goes into the general fund, and it could buy a chair in the waiting room or whatever. And we wanted something more meaningful. So that's kind of what we did. And and we could have done it. It took on a life of its own. We could have, that would have been a full-time job. Like, I started in January and went right through to, I always did it the first week after school, so it didn't take up my whole summer, because it took on a life of its own, and the support was awesome. Like, companies were sponsoring, and we had a big silent auction in the fairgrounds hall that was, by the time we were finishing, it was like up 400 items, and there was plane tickets and train rides and vacations and hotels and autographed baseball and hockey and everything you can think of. And a little small town raising $60,000, and it was awesome. And obviously there's a few accolades and rewards that came along with it, but to be able to go down each year to the hospital and present the big check to them, and for them to buy something that's going to help other kids, was pretty awesome.
It's a beautiful story, and it's amazing how doing something that's positively motivating can help get through grief, right? Like, I think of launching the program at Brock and how that helped me deal with the fact my brother died. There is, I needed something at that point, because otherwise you're just in a hole. You're trapped in the cycle of thinking, why me? And how does, you've tried to, you ask yourself a million times, how does this happen? And really, the thing is that you can let things become an albatross around your neck, or you can let them become a rocket ship that you strap yourself to. And it's, I think, an amazing testament to your daughter that you're able to actually turn something into a way of taking a negative and turning it into a positive. It's a wonderful scenario. It's amazing, Steve. Anything else that, like, as we're not yet in our golden years. We're just firmly in the middle age. But you got some things you want to get accomplished as you roll through your 25th year teaching and these kinds of things. Get something on the docket.
I have another story.
Okay.
Just with our Kylie's cause that's tied to baseball. This is pretty cool. So, what was it? 2010. So we're close to Detroit. We'd go to more Detroit games because it's just across the bridge. We're 50 minutes to the ballpark kind of thing. So Detroit was always good to send us autographed baseballs and shirts and jerseys or whatever for the auction. And then in 2010, I get this email from this lady at the Tigers front office, and then she says, "This is something new. You might be interested in applying." And it was a contest for people through People magazine called People All Stars, and it was basically for people that do community service or community work in their communities, and each Major League Baseball team was going to be able to pick one person to represent them at the 2010 All-Star Game in Anaheim, California. So I kind of looked at the email and I'm like, yeah, probably not. And then get us another email saying the deadline's coming up, and I'm like, what the heck? It's 500 words to tell your story and what you're doing or whatever. But then it came down to the bottom and it said you have to pick one Major League Baseball team to align yourself with. And I'm like, well, Detroit sent it to me, but we're Canadian and the Jays are on our Canadian team. And I'm like, I got to go with the Blue Jays. So I ended up clicking off the box, sending it off, and never thought anything of it. And then probably 2 or 3 months later, I get a call at school saying they need to talk to me and People magazine and whatever. And I'm like, what do you? So anyways, get down to it. I had been made the final 3 for the Blue Jays. So they whittled down all the entrants for each team down to 3. And then it went to online voting to see who would win. So basically they would play little blips of our story during Blue Jay broadcasts, and they would, there's the 3 of us or whatever, and they would tell different parts each game or whatever and put the voting link on. And it was one of those things where you didn't have to just vote once. You could just refresh and keep voting. So then once word got out that I was in the running and Facebook was just starting to come out, that helped a huge amount just to spread the word. And then it got filtered through the school email system. And then pretty soon classes were going to the computer lab and all the kids were just sitting there, vote, voting all day long. So whether that pushed me over the top or not, anyways, I ended up winning. And so we got a all expense paid trip to the Anaheim All-Star Game in 2010. I got to be down on the field, before the game. All the All-Stars were surrounding us. Some singer, I wasn't aware who she was. Mercedes from Glee at the time was the big hot show. She was singing in front and trained at a personal concert for us. And we got to go to batting practice and got to sit in a box for the game and got to meet a bunch of the All-Stars. We were at the same hotel as the players were. So like my son, who was 5 at the time, and we kind of fought to get him to go because he's a baseball junkie at that age too, and he just loved it. And so we ended up paying for his ticket to go, and then ended up he got to go to everything we did, which was awesome. But he got to spend time. He was in the pool. He was swimming with Roy Halladay's kids in the pool, chasing the key card in the pool, diving after it. I had to go to a meet and greet dinner thing with, and I was the only one allowed to go. So my wife and son stayed back. And so we got to go to the dinner thing, and we got to spend 5 minutes with Barry Larkin. And Barry Larkin was the guest, and he made his way around to all 30 winners just to kind of chat and take pictures and get things signed and whatever. And that was pretty cool. And I go back to the hotel afterwards, and some of the players are down in the lobby bar or whatever. And I go find my wife. She's in the lobby. Jace is running around, and she goes, some big guy was wrestling with Jace in the lobby. She said, I didn't get a picture of it. I'm like, well, who was it? She goes, I don't know. And then, so I just gone, okay, whatever. And then that night she didn't go to the home run derby. She gave her ticket to my son. So him and I went together, and she's at the hotel watching the home run derby, and she's like, that's the guy that was wrestling with Jace. And I get home and she's like, yeah, the guy that won the home run derby was wrestling with Jace in the front lobby. And it was Big Poppy. She didn't know who he was. But yeah, Big Poppy was wrestling and throwing my 5-year-old around in the lobby. So, and yeah, and just one other little tidbit. We were down on the field for the All-Star game to start, and they had the 5 tenors, or the Canadian tenors, I guess, 3 of them were supposed to sing "O Canada." Well, the mic cut out, and you couldn't hear them. So I'm standing there, and you're facing the flag, and they started "O Canada," and then it cuts out, and then I feel this poke on the back, and I turned around. I'm like, "This is "O Canada." I'm on TV. I don't want to make a scene here, and I kind of looked over my shoulder, and it's Joey Votto, and he's like, him and I were the only Canadians on the field, and I had talked to him before, so he kind of knew why I was there, and he's like, "Hey, you and I are going to sing this. Let's go." And so here we are singing "O Canada" on the field with all these all-stars, and it was kind of surreal.
That sounds like a great experience. Were you particularly awed by any of the people you met? Was there one that you were like, my goodness, I can't believe that I'm talking to this guy or I'm on the same field? And, I mean, my recollection, I've been on the field a few times with major league players, is that they're big. They're much bigger up close than they look on television, or when you're sitting in the crowd. Sometimes they are some really big dudes, and
they are very big, and a lot of them are very down to earth. Right, when you get all these 30 people with crazy, amazing stories that got them there for this contest or whatever, and after you got to mingle with, I think the year that we were there, Jose Bautista, Johnny Buck was the catcher, and Vernon Wells, they were the Toronto All-Stars. And after the anthems and things, they allowed the players to come mingle. So they would come find you because you represented the same team, and you got pictures and chatted and whatever. And turned out that Johnny Buck, him and his wife had twins, and both were in the NICU. So you kind of made that connection as well, that they understood what we were going through and the emotional roller coaster, and what we were doing to kind of help others. And Votto, I am so happy he ended up, getting a chance with the Jays. I hope he can stick, but super down to earth. And, most of the players came in the back door because they didn't want to, like at the hotel afterwards, because they didn't want to have anybody, approach them or mob them or whatever. They go in the back entrance. Votto gets out of the shuttle van or whatever. He's got his Cincinnati Reds red ball bag thrown over his shoulder, and he walks right through the front door. And he comes over and he goes, "Here, you got to talk to me here for a few minutes." He says that they're getting my stuff. I'm catching a cab. I'm flying back tonight, back home or whatever. And so he just sat there and shot the shit for 20 minutes while he's waiting for his cab, and it was just like old times, right? You wouldn't know he was an all-star. He wouldn't, he just down to earth and very personable, and and some of the guys, like the Yankees, and they got their entourages behind them and wearing all the bling and everything else, and it was just like they didn't want any part of being social with anybody. And then you got Votto that just walks through the door, and he'll talk to anybody. So I think that's more of a Canadian thing, maybe.
I think it's a great precursor, knowing that he's signed as a free agent with the Jays, and that's exciting. So, given that you can't be a popular stance in Wyoming to be the Jays fan, is there?
It's pretty good. It's tied.
Is
You're
it?
either Tigers or Jays. So
Yeah, it's a pretty hard line down that way, for sure. Did you get involved with coaching after your playing career was over?
yeah. So my son, I coached him, right. I coached teams before we had kids, and then once Jace came along, he was a year after Kylie passed. So 2005, he was born, and so once he was 3, 4, we did a lot of stuff in the backyard, and started in instructional. Got him started, kind of coached a team there, and kind of followed all the way up through the ranks and mosquito and rookie ball with the machine. Glad we were done that. That machine is heavy and cumbersome to lug around with the generator to power it up to play in those practices and games. So we coached them there, and basically all the way up to U16. So rookie ball, our second year, we ended up winning OBAs in Coburg. So we were up there. And then second year mosquito, we ended up winning again in Essex, down at the other end. And then that was in C. So they got rid of E and we got bumped up. Basically, you were a D center, but we jumped up to play C because we were a fairly solid group. And then we jumped up to B the following year and lost in the semis, I think. And then by U16, that's when COVID hit. And then it was kind of, are we playing? Are we not? Playing? Are we not? And then, so we were actually playing in Double A, and we played Brantford, Cambridge, all those Tri-County, Kitchener, all those teams. And we're hanging right with them. We ended up third, I think. We lost in the semis. But the small little town, you go to all these games and people are like, where's Wyoming? Never heard of it, blah, blah, blah. And then they're thinking that we're going to, be a pushover. And then these little farm kids from Wyoming come out and show them that they can play. So it's pretty gratifying doing that. And at school, I know the Jays just came out the last few years with different programs. And I've been running the Girls at Bat program at school for the last 3 years, which is basically for grade 4 to 6 girls that haven't played or are just new to the game. And so we play at recess and before school and get the kids introduced to baseball and keep them playing and keep them active. And I kind of stepped away from baseball. My son ended up getting drafted by the Peterborough Petes for hockey. And that was in 2021. And he was kind of torn. He liked baseball and liked hockey. And we weren't allowed to get together because of COVID sanctions and stuff. So the Petes were always doing Thursday night Zoom calls with the players and draft picks at 7:00. Well, our baseball games were Thursday night, 7:00 at home. And he was sitting at home and kind of had his ball uniform on underneath. And he had his Pete's golf shirt on up top doing the Zoom call. But it just got to the point where he's like, okay, I got to decide what I'm doing here, because I can't be missing out on one to do another or whatever. So that he kind of veered away, but he still watches baseball. He still likes it, and he's still there. And I missed it, so I went back and I started helping coach with the younger kids again, and helped with a team 2 summers ago. Last summer, I didn't go back with a team. I just kind of took my bucket of balls and used social media and said, who wants one-on-one sessions at, from 9 till noon any day of the week, because I'm off in the summer. So I got a few of the young kids doing some lessons and keeping me involved, and started umpiring back again. I umpired all through, grade 7, 8, all the way up through high school, and then got back into it. A few years ago, I just did it just in case someone didn't show up and they needed somebody, I could go down and do it. And then last year I got into it a little more, and I said, they're paying a whole lot more now than they were back when I first started. So it's not so bad.
That's great that you're giving back in such a meaningful way to the game, right? It's I doubt I would have the temperament to be an umpire. I'd probably toss, anyone that came anywhere near me. But it takes a certain amount of patience to be an umpire, for sure. Would you say
the hardest part is that I know and anybody that's played the game knows the game, and a lot of the parents or even the coaches, some of them don't know certain plays and games, and they start to argue with you, and you're just like, don't even bother. Like, I know you're wrong, and I'm not going to engage with you right now. I said, this is the call. When the game's over, go look it up, and you can tell me if I was right or wrong after, kind of thing, right? But yeah, that's the frustrating part. But when you're right, you're going to win that argument. So
Yeah, it's I can remember a hilarious experience. I got called out to umpire a game, and I was not a guy that did a lot of umpiring, but I think I was in junior baseball at the time, and said we're fresh at umpires. Can you make it down to do this house league game? And the problem is I needed a base ump, right? You can't just have one. So I recruited a friend of mine who it seemed to me that he knew the game enough, and he just said to me, "What do I do?" I'm like, "You're going to do the bases, so pretty simple. If the guy's out, you're going to do the out sign, and if he's safe, you're going to stick your arms out." I think that sounds safe enough, right? Second or third inning, there's a clear force play at second, and they throw it to the guy on the bag, and the guy coming from first is probably 5 feet, but Jay, instead of saying, he got his signs mixed up. So he meant to say out, but he did the safe sign, and it nearly caused a riot with the parents. I had to throw 3 of them out because they were threatening to storm the field to kill the base ump. And I just said to him from there on in, I'm like, don't do that again, please, because it's going to get ugly here. So we had 3 parents that I had to make sure got over past this bike path, and they set their their lawn chairs up, but they were still heckling. I could hear them all game long because Jay had never done any umpiring, never been to a clinic, so it was dodgy the entire game. There were some really bad calls, and you just want to get through it and not have the parents riot at that point. But
Yep.
we all have our own umpiring experiences, so it sounds like you're in control, which is better than I was. I was not.
I'd like to think most nights I am, but I know that even just with the clinics and stuff, like you got to get certified every year, and that's kind of a pain for some people, and it maybe turns them off. But I know that it's kind of been a switch. Like it used to be make your call and stick with it, and now it's like make the right call. So if you did that by mistake, it's like, call time and say, my mistake, I made the wrong, like this is what the call is, and try to straighten it out, which I think in the long run, that's what, your video replay is trying to do, is just get the call right. But in the crowd's eyes and some of the older generation is like, no, you made the call, you got to stick with it. And now it's more like, no, I made the wrong call and I know I did. I'm correcting it so that the game is, it's right again. So that's the transition part that's a little rough at times.
You would hope that the parents would be self-aware enough to understand that if you're willing to admit a mistake, it's a hard thing to do. But we've all seen sports parents, and they can be interesting in their reactions. So that's super cool. Is your son still playing with the Peets?
He went up to training camp three years, and I thought he's right on the cusp this year. He's not blessed with a lot of height, so he's at about 5'10" and a half, and as a defenseman, I think they're looking for a little bit taller and bigger. But he had a good camp, and he has no regrets. He went and tried, and and he's playing junior B hockey here, and he started at Lambton College, and he's taken the instrumentation control engineering program, which is way more math and science than I ever want to do, but he's doing well in it, and he's balancing both, and he's happy. So we just are along for the ride.
That's exciting, Steve. It's like life moves on, and we all just are hoping to enjoy as much of it as we can.
Yeah.
After 30 years, is there, do you have one of those ex-teammates where you're like, I wonder what that guy is up to? Because it could go either way, right? It could be in jail. It could be in jail, or they could be running a corporation. You got a few of those names that you're like, I'm really just curious as to what they're up to.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because as the guys are starting to reconnect and start bantering back and forth and different things, and you start remembering different guys that you have, you haven't talked to or whatever. And I know, like, Andrew Dawes was one of our players in the first couple of years. He was an engineering student at Mac, and when you're playing with him, he was hilarious, and he was built like a brick shit house, and the kid could fly, and he was, you see him in the gym, and he was just chiseled. And it was probably 10, maybe more years ago. I think one of the guys from the team, I forget who it was, sent out a picture or a link, and Dozzy was one of the Sunshine Boys in the Toronto Sun paper with his shirt off, and had all the girls swooning at. And he went into modeling and bodybuilding, I think, after too. And he, I don't know where he is now. It'd be interesting to touch base with him to see what's up. But he was one I was thinking, and another guy, Richie Taylor, played one of the years with me, and him and his brother started a company, I think, with baseball bats, making chairs or something along those lines. But something went awry. He ended up being a teacher in Hamilton, and I think he's in jail now. He ended up murdering somebody or parents or
Oh man,
it was a wild story, and I was just like, I played ball with him. Like, he was in my room, I think, at McGill when we went for that weekend.
Oh Jesus.
I'm just trying to think, and I'm like, wow, like, but you never know. Things in people's circumstances change, and I don't know the whole details, and I don't care to spread rumors or anything, but it was just like, wow, never seen that coming.
I can say this because I went there. I would have much more anticipated that coming out of Brock than I would have Mac, from that perspective. But we're blessed in that we have a lot of people who are doing really well in life, have, done some extraordinary things and are passionate leader types. And it sounds like you're doing exactly the same, and Wyoming is a better place because your family probably doubles the population with all of them being in and around, but also that, it's a great story to think of someone that leaves home, goes and gets educated and gets some life experience, and then comes back and reinvests in, the next generations of kids that come out of the area. So, you may end up, if you don't watch it, you may end up becoming mayor of Wyoming if you don't watch it. But that's exciting, Steve. I think it's great what you've done.
Thank you. Yeah, the mayor that was before, like when we were doing our events, he would always come and speak, and he always joked that I'd be the next mayor and that'd be my job. But I'm like, me and politics don't work well. I don't work well with being a yes man. I don't like all the red tape and the hoops you got to go through to get stuff done. It's not my cup of tea.
Well,
I said, working in the school board, trying to get, we're trying to revitalize our playground, and we're fundraising, and, we've got, $40,000 we've raised, and we want to spend it, but we got to go through all these hoops to get things done, and board approvals and everything. And it's just like, let's just go and get it done.
Yeah, it can be, bureaucracy can be kind of frustrating, and I'm sure that you've lived through that. I don't take it that COVID was easy on educators, because, doing online classes is about the worst thing in the world from what I can ascertain. And
yep,
must be happy to be back in front of live responsive
Absolutely.
people, and it helps the kids too. Like the kids weren't learning anything under those circumstances. It's tough. So
yeah, during COVID, I'm basically a kindergarten to grade 8 phys ed teacher. So trying to do phys ed online with kids that don't have to turn their camera on and may or may not be in bed or out of bed, I don't know. And you're trying to do exercise and roll in some health and some life lessons. And so then I'm like, okay, we got to, and you get a third of your class or a quarter of your class to log in, and some of them have internet out in the country and some of them don't, or it's shoddy or whatever. They don't have enough devices. And so I ended up, me and my teaching partner, we decided each week we would reach out and use some of our contacts to come on and do interviews like this, and kind of do some, the guy down the street played baseball, and we have a friend that plays for the Blackhawks, and we got him on, and we got a nurse that was on the front lines of going through COVID, and then we had a former classmate of ours at high school that was in Vancouver and designing Nintendo games and had his own company. And so we were trying to tap into anybody we knew that had kind of a cool experience or job or whatever. And our viewership kind of came on, and then we had other kids from other classes wanting to say, hey, can we join in? So at least we were engaging them to, stay connected, I guess, and keep going. But it helped pass the time, that's for sure.
That's great, man. I think, it's a little bit about what we're doing here. We're kind of pulling back the curtain on people's lives so that when we meet up in 8 months' time, it's not so much catch up. It might be, hey, I can't believe you said that about Newton, which, all of us would understand, completely. Billy is his own.
Do you want a Newt story?
Absolutely.
You're seeing him today. So
yeah.
Last year, his son was making the rounds because it was his draft year for hockey, and the Sarnia Sting, which are close to us, had him invited down for a tour and a kind of a walkthrough because they were thinking about drafting him and whatever. And so he was coming to a game, so he reaches out and he goes, hey, how far are you from Sarnia? We're coming down, whatever. And I'm like, well, I'm going to the game. I have tickets already. And he goes, all right, I'm going to meet up with you, whatever. So we meet up, and Billy's the same as he always was. I hadn't seen him in 30 years, and he rolls in, and we just took off like we left off. And the 1 year at Mac, it was probably our second year. He would be in third year, but I ended up taking an elective course, history of warfare, and he was in the class. He was a history and poli-sci guy or something. And so we came, and we ended up finding out, like, we didn't know we were in the same class until he walks in, and he goes, hey, you're in the class, whatever. He came, sat down beside me, and he goes, hey, I talked to a guy that had this class last year. He said the exam is all based on the book and the readings. You don't even need to come to class. And I'm like, oh. And I'm like, that's weird. And I'm like, and I'm one of those guys that I'm like, you know what? Every class costs about $100 of my tuition. I'm not missing one, kind of thing, right? So Billy, after the first week, he takes off and never seen him again in that class. And then it come, 3 weeks down the road, the professor goes off on a sabbatical or leave, and the new guy comes in, and it's all based on lecture. So he has no lecture notes, never came to class, never knew there was a new prof. And so we get to exam time, and he goes, hey, I hear the exam's going to be all lectures. And he says, I never went to any. So I ended up bailing him out and giving him all my notes, and he went and photocopied them all. And the bugger goes and writes the exam, and he gets a higher mark than I did. I went to all the and so he's like, hey, I got to pay you back or whatever. And he said, he goes, my cousin, because his cousin was Greg Newton that played for Duke basketball, and Duke was playing at Michigan, and he was going up, and it was right around Christmas time. And of course, the history and poli-sci guys didn't have many exams at Christmas, so he was basically out the first day, and he was going to Michigan, and he says, I got a ticket for you. You're going to come. You bailed me out, whatever. And I said, no, I got exams. I have to write till the last day before Christmas break or whatever. And he says, I can't go. So he ends up going and brings me back a little Duke, and I still have it, a Duke mini basketball signed by the whole team. And then I said, it was just after the Grant Hill year, so it was like Trajan Langdon and a few others, but not a whole lot of big names like there was before. But that was his peace offering for bailing him out from not going to history class.
It's such a Newt's thing to do, eh? Is be like, we don't need to come to this class, damn it. And he's just a classic. I mean, I've got a lot of time for Billy. I said on our podcast together that our daughters were on a defense pairing that won the SO Cup. So, it's amazing. People as competitive as the two of us sitting there and being really laid back actually at our daughters' hockey games, because the other hockey parents are just so crazy. It's just kind of like, wow, I can't believe anyone would act this way. And it's because, when you play, the last thing you'd want is your parents in the stands acting like monkeys, right? Like, it's just horrific. So, but he hasn't changed one iota. I think he set a record in a video cast for dropping F-bombs, which was amazing. I said to him, I should have just had like a counter at the bottom of the screen. I should have added one for every time we would have had to bleep you out if this was a PG-13 era. But really one of the guys that defines your team, I think, from a McMaster standpoint.
Yep.
Steve, amazing. I think it's a great, thank you for opening up about your daughter, and hopefully she's looking down and sitting on your shoulder every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it sounds like a really cool story that you married your high school sweetheart, or could be grade school in Wyoming. I'm just letting you know that. And that you've been kind of a hometown guy that's come back and is paying back. I think that's super cool, and I really appreciate your time today.
Well, thanks for having us, and thanks for doing all your work to get everybody reconnected again. It's been pretty awesome to touch base. I know Guindon got us started and kind of got this group together, and he's not here to see it all through, but he started his quest across North America to see all the ball games, and I said I never heard of that before when he was doing it, and now it seems like everybody's doing it, and I think I've got 12 ballparks in, and I got a bunch to go. So that's kind of one of my bucket list things to do once I get towards the end of my career and into retirement or whatever, and just to keep knocking off a few and seeing the sights, and
there's a few that
making use of our time.
There's a few that really stick out. I mean, I absolutely loved the park in Pittsburgh. It's just a beautiful setting. And I went to St. Louis a few years ago with Brad Reason, or it was a Brad Reason memorial trip. 4 of us went, and just because Brad was a Cardinals fan of all things. He liked the Jays, but he was a huge Cardinals fan, and it's got that birthplace of baseball feel to it. It's all museums around the park, and truthfully, the park was one of the only nice things about St. Louis. We also went up in the Arch at a certain point, but I really like getting around and seeing the other parks, and the West Coast is the next one for me. I want to do Seattle and San Francisco and Los Angeles all in the same sweep if we can. So I think that's great. And, Jason is a special person. And I think, when you're pioneering anything, it takes courage, it takes resourcefulness, it takes vision to do these things. And I don't think there's a more telling story than him probably picking out your cleats or a bat that was hanging out of your stuff, and all of a sudden he's right there. You're playing baseball, aren't you? You can write a $300 check, can't you? Like, it's just the way it's so classic. So, Steve, thank you for your time today, and have a great weekend, and we'll see you in about 6.5, 7 months' time.
Sounds good, Mike. Thanks a lot.
The smell